This is Pastor Steve bringing you the Hebrew Roots of End Time Prophecy, Part 6. Now, we're not going to do a lot of end time today, but more on the Hebrew roots today. For those who weren't here, we've already covered 5 sessions of Hebrew roots. We did God's timing, prophetic timelines, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, signs in the sky, and experiencing God's feasts as a Christian. Now today I believe will be really well-balanced and well-rounded. I hope it is. And we're going to do much more than end-time prophecy. The reason that we go to the Hebrew roots is we need to understand the culture and the context of what God is saying to us from the Bible. I understand the subject sensitively because I wrote a book called From Buddha to Jesus, where I have to try to help Christians to understand that the Buddhist mindset is different from the Christian mindset, and how the differences interplay really affects evangelism, discipleship, and the rest of it. And so when we don't understand mindsets, it can build walls. And when we do understand mindsets, it builds bridges. So it's really important that we understand Hebrew roots, and we don't talk about it a lot, but we need to. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 16. Right? For who has known the mind of the Lord that he may instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. Say, I have the mind of Christ. If you are a born-again, blood-washed Christian, you have the mind of Christ. What does that mean? Number 1, intelligence is added to you at the new birth. Number 2, no matter how intelligent you were, you can now be more intelligent. Number 3, I believe a big part of what makes us more intelligent when we become Christian is knowing Christ helps you to make connections or put the pieces of life together. And that's really something they can't teach you in school. And no human teacher can do that for you. So we have the mind of Christ. If you really do have the mind of Christ, my question is, what kind of mind is that? Well, the same scripture in the Aramaic Bible says, for who has known the mind of the Lord Jehovah, that he may teach him? But we do have the mind of the Messiah. You see, to have the mind of Christ is to have a Hebrew mindset. We need to understand that. Why do we go back to the Hebrew roots? Romans chapter 11, verse 24. You were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted, contrary to nature, into a cultivated olive tree. That's the New King James. Most of us are not Jews, and we're not schooled in Hebrew thought. We were grafted into a tree, a family tree. You know what we call your ancestors our family tree. But that's the tree. It's a family of God. We were grafted into a tree that is deeply rooted in experience and history with God. And we kind of just come and show up as Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Thai, European, Australian, American, and we kind of just get introduced or get thrown into a culture and a family that is rich in experience with God. And a lot of times we don't even know what those experiences were. We don't know the history very well. In fact, a lot of Christians have been told to stay away from the Old Testament or the Tanakh, and then they miss out on this deep heritage that we have. Romans chapter 11, verse 24, illustrated. Here it is. What is it talking about? Well, the wild olive trees kind of look like this, and I used to have an olive tree growing in my previous house. And if you don't tend to it, it is wild. I mean, the branches are everywhere, and when it's time for pruning, it's a big mess, kind of like this photo on the left. The cultivated olive tree is Israel. The wild olive trees are the Gentile nations. And Israel has been well cultivated for eons, for millennia. It started with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah. Then skip a few generations, King David. Skip a few generations, the Messiah, Yeshua. That's his name in Hebrew. Now we Latinize it and we say Jesus, but his name really is Yeshua. So that's the tree that we're grafted in. Everybody follow that? Yes. Sure, good. All right, there's a difference between Greek and Hebrew thinking. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 22. For Jews require a sign, and the Greeks seek after wisdom. There's a lot of scriptures actually that show us there's a difference between Greek and Hebrew thinking. And once you understand this, as you will today, you will not only understand eschatology or end times better, you're going to understand the Bible better, you're going to understand the Lord Jesus much better, and I think you're going to understand the way that you process information day to day much better. So that's what we're trying to aim at today. All right, what does it mean when Paul says Jews require a sign and Greeks seek after wisdom? I wonder if people ever spend any time digesting this. Well, what's a sign? A sign is an object or event that indicates the presence of or points to something else. Right? So we have signs on the road. So the thing hasn't come yet, but the sign says the thing is coming. So we live by signs. We need signs. If you still wear a watch today, that's a sign. There are no hands of time. There's no such thing. But it is a symbol, a metaphor that we need to live by. Now, this word wisdom is used a bit derogatorily. The New Living Translation says the Greeks seek after human wisdom. The Aramaic Bible says they seek after philosophy. In other words, they're interested in intellect and theories. And the Western world has really been formed by Greco-Roman thought. So if you've never been educated in the classics, I'm going to give you a little bit of classics education as well as biblical education today. 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 23 continues. In the New Living, I'll be reading from. So when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews are offended, and the Gentiles say it's all nonsense. But to those called by God to salvation, both Jews and Gentiles, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. What is he saying? Christ can satisfy both longings, both requirements. He is the power of God, the sign of God that the Jews look for. He also is the wisdom of God, the intellect of God that the Greeks are looking for. That's why he's called the Logos. Many Christian preachers think that the word Logos means word. It actually isn't true. There are other words that mean word. I won't go through it, but gramma is actually a word for word. But the word logos means much more than word. It means logic. That God has a logic to what he does. He has a rationality. He is supremely intelligent. And the Greeks seek after that, and God is all in all. He's everything. But he starts with the Jews first, and then the Gentiles. So here's the Hebrew mindset. If you read Revelation and you don't know the Hebrew mindset, you might miss some important things. Verse 1 of chapter 1 in Revelation. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants, things which must shortly take place. In other words, the future. And he sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John. Everyone say signified. What does that mean? Well, you break that word up. Signified looks like signified. And that's what it means. Revelation is a sign, a communication by symbols to the Jews. And so a lot of Christians don't understand it because it's written in a lot of Hebrew language with a lot of Hebrew metaphors. So Revelation, of all the books in the New Testament, is perfect for the Jews who demand signs. God signified the future. That means he communicated it in signs, symbols, metaphors, codes, and numerical patterns. All these signs are explained elsewhere in the Hebrew Tanakh or our Old Testament. And that's the subject of my book, The Divine Code. I explain the codes and the numerical patterns and the symbolism in the Bible and kind of group them all together according to numbers so it's easier for you to find. Mindset matters. What I'm going to do now is going to give you a sweeping overview of how Greek thought is different from Hebrew thought. In fact, I'm going to separate the two sides as Greco-Roman Western mindset versus God's mindset or the Hebrew Eastern mindset. All right, so I'm going to give you an overview right now. On the one hand, the Greek mindset believes in chaos. randomness, accidents, meaninglessness. There is no purpose, there is no intelligent driving force. It's chaos. The Hebrew or Eastern mindset believes in patterns and looks for patterns. The Greek mindset is linear, the Hebrew mindset is cyclical. Goes in cycles. Greek mindset is progressive. They like that word even today. And the Hebrew mindset is prophetic. They're different. Greek mindset is quintessentially evolutionary. The Hebrew mindset is revolutionary. Greek mindset is impersonal. The Hebrew or Eastern mindset is personal. And we still live this today when you say that the difference, or you hear that the difference between Western society and Eastern society, sometimes people say that relationships matter a lot more in business. Relationship is what counts. Whereas in the Western world, it's your stats, your facts, your merits. If you can prove that you're better, then maybe you win the contract, the project, but not so in Japan, not so in China, right? Why? Because relationships are more important. It's a personal mindset, and the Hebrews are very much like this. The Greek mindset is debate-oriented. The Hebrew mindset and Eastern mindset is action-oriented. And this is something I deal with over and over in my book, From Buddha to Jesus, because a lot of the Western intellectuals who Google Buddhism or read something about Buddhism or took a course in Western university, and I've done that as well. I grew up in a Buddhist country and took a Western Buddhist course, and I realized that they don't understand, they intellectualize Buddhism so much that they don't really get how to bridge the gap to the Buddhists, because Buddhists are basically practical, but Westerners are philosophical. And so Westerners, as missionaries, go over to Asia and prepare all these philosophical arguments thinking that they're going to win the Buddhists, and they don't. And they have such a hard time. And they don't realize that the Easterner is much more practical or into pragmatics, not philosophy. Unless they've been influenced by Western education. So some of the countries have been colonized by the Western world, and then they become more and more philosophical. The motto for the Greek mindset is everything is getting better by random process. The motto for the Hebrew mindset is the more things change, the more they stay the same. So the question is, which mindset is more realistic? Is life linear, or is everything getting better by itself, as evolution claims? Let's take a look at this. I'm going to illustrate each of these differences, each of these contrasts or juxtapositions, and hopefully you'll get a really clear view of what the difference is. Again, understanding cultural differences really helps us to bridge the gap, understand the Bible, and I believe we'll see a clearer picture of Jesus Christ. So let's start with the first one, chaos versus patterns. What do you think? In real life, do we see chaos or do we see patterns? Well, we do see some chaos at some level, but at the macro level where we live, we see a lot of patterns. I mean, here's fruit, a flower, showing the Fibonacci pattern. And I would dare say that you'd have a hard time drawing that. As smart as you are, whatever your IQ is, man, that takes a lot of intelligence to do that. And all sorts of plants exhibit these Fibonacci patterns. And you can be a mathematician and draw all sorts of graphs and lines to calculate these things. But we certainly see that creation is full of patterns. Here's a shell showing the Fibonacci spiral, and in math textbooks you probably have seen this. They study this as a picture of elegance. We can't do better than what God has done in creation. And these spiral patterns exist not only on a small scale, but all the way up to the level of the galaxies. We see the Fibonacci spiral. All right, Greek thought is evolutionary. They say slowly, over millions and millions of years, inanimate matter became conscious. How? Well, we've never seen that, but they believe that and use pictures to illustrate that. The Hebrew mindset is revolutionary. All right, so what is life really like on earth? Well, one of the things that disproves evolution is the whole revolutionary nature of nature. For instance, I think it's basic biology that we all know that plants breathe carbon dioxide, CO2, and exhale oxygen. We then consume the oxygen and exhale the CO2. And that creates a revolutionary cycle in nature. And both of them exist together as if they were always together, because they're dependent on each other to give both the oxygen and the carbon dioxide to each other. If slowly over millions of years matter organized itself, then there's no meaning to life whatsoever, including the whole premise of atheism would have no meaning whatsoever. But this idea of mutualism, which is shown, which we see in nature, shows an irreducible complexity. Life is design, and life is an integrated system. Plants and the animals existed together at the same time and mutually depend on each other. In fact, we can see that life is not evolutionary, it's design. Over 170,000 plants and 200,000 animals are involved in the plant-pollinator mutualism. Plants must have perfumes, colors, nectar, resin, wax to attract existing animals, such as bees. And the bees must simultaneously have the ability to extract the nectar and use the wax and the resin to build their wonderful beehives. One could not exist without the other. They had to simultaneously and instantly evolve, or in other words, they were designed with each other in mind at the same time. In a word, they were created. And life proves that. The Greek mindset assumes that new species must be evolving all the time. That's how we get the millions and millions of diverse species we have. But the Hebrew mindset says that each species reproduces after its kind. And that's basic Genesis right from the beginning. So, are the Greeks right? Are one species turning into another species? Well, what we see in nature is bears make bears, and cheetahs make cheetah cubs, and pandas make panda cubs. And in fact, there's no example of any new species that we've observed, and many examples of extinctions. And this is a graph of the extinction rate for the past 200 years. Now, why isn't there a graph that looks like that for species that are just popping up out of nowhere by the wonderful random forces of evolution? Because God and science agree, each species reproduce after its own kind. So, that's me. I'm not producing any new species. Humans reproduce humans. That's my daughter and my son. Every human, in fact, whether related to me directly or not, we are all 99% identical, genetically speaking. So where's the evolution? Not only is there no evidence for evolution, what we do see in the gene pool is that genes are denigrating. We are getting weaker, sicker. We have more problems. I would suppose that, if you could go back millions of years ago, if that was true, and everybody had to wear glasses, but there was nobody making glasses, we'd all be bumping heads. We'd all be, maybe walking into a rhinoceros or walking up to a tiger and get eaten. That'd be a big problem, right? But today, so many people wear glasses. And when we get old, then, a lot of people, almost everybody wears glasses. So the genes are actually degrading. All right, the Greek mindset is linear. The Hebrew mindset is cyclical, right? So what do we see? We see, for instance, the hydraulic cycle. That's how water evaporates, turns to clouds, then precipitation falls down, goes to the rivers and oceans, and then heat makes it evaporate again, and the cycle keeps moving. This is part of the cycle of this planet. And we have that's called the hydraulic cycle. We have the weather cycle. Earth has many natural cycles because of the tilt of the earth, the way that it revolves around the earth. We have the seasonal cycles, or seasons repeat. It's something that's repetitive, something that we can count on. We know there's going to be winter, spring, summer, fall. It's nothing new is going to happen. There's not going to be a fifth season. There's not going to be a sixth season. It's not linear. It is cyclical. It's part of the dependable thing about life. Makes life not only bearable, but makes life productive. All right, a scientist said practically everything in reality oscillates. So you can see the structure of the wave there. There are sound waves, light waves, ocean waves, radio waves, microwaves, X-rays. All electromagnetic energy is in waves. We go to market cycles. This is a graph of the commodity cycle. People say that there's a 30-year commodity cycle. Commodities are, wheat and corn, sugar, silver, gold. There's a commodity cycle. There's a short-term cycle, intermediate cycle, long-term cycle. I guess the mid-term cycle is the 200-year commodity cycle, and that's what they've found in studying it. The market is not linear. If you study it, you'll find Elliott waves, Fibonacci retracements, Gann fans. Without patterns, no one could make a probable prediction about anything. Cycles and patterns are the bread and butter of every field of human endeavor. All right, Greek mindset is progressive. The Hebrew mindset is prophetic. The key scripture for the Hebrew mindset is Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 9. If you understand this, you will understand prophecy. That which has been is what will be, and that which is done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. In other words, people say this, history repeats itself. I say it this way, history is prophecy, or history cycles. A lot of times people don't understand prophecy because they never studied history. And people don't value history because they think from a Greek mindset that history is linear. And so they think, well, what's the point of studying some dead old people? It doesn't have anything to do with me. No, it has a lot to do with you because history cycles. See, once you understand history is prophetic, then it just increases the value of studying history. Now we get to the prophetic. This is why all ideas of the Antichrist being American, Russian, Belgian, French, Spanish, etc. are all nonsense from Greco-Roman misinterpretation. It's departing from precedents, patterns, and prophecies in the Bible. Once you understand the Hebrew mindset, you understand the biblical enemies of God and His people are the following. Just a short list. Nimrod, Ishmael, Pharaoh, Nebuchadnezzar, Antiochus Epiphanes IV, a Syrian who defiled the temple of God. Well, what do all these names have in common? They're all from a currently Muslim country. Ding, 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 ding. The Bible couldn't be clearer. It is so clear what the Bible is communicating. But people won't, read prophecy with a Hebrew mindset. They read it with a Greco-Roman, American, European mindset. And it's not that it's wrong, everything about that is wrong, but to impose that on the scriptures, which are essentially Hebrew, it will cause misinterpretations. Once you understand that mindset matters, you understand that the idea that Russia will invade Israel is nonsense. And I know that I have many American and Canadian followers who will be shocked, but look at the scriptures. It has never happened before. The Hebrew mindset is cyclical. The Hebrew mindset takes patterns and precedents and projects to the future. This is why Easterners love fortune telling, because Easterners look for patterns and cycles. It's the way that we live. But Westerners don't live that way. Westerners think things are just going to improve in a linear fashion. It's going to get better and better and better. And of course, we saw when people thought there's going to be world peace, we plunged into 2 world wars. When people thought science will cure every disease, now we have like over 80 new autoimmune diseases we can't even keep up with. And new diseases that we're just having to name. See, it's not linear, right? So when we look at Russia invading Israel, historically speaking, it's never happened before. Yes, Russia sells arms to Muslim countries. Yes, some of the ex-Soviet states, especially the Stan countries, are Muslims. So maybe Russia or her ex-satellites may be involved in some invasion in the Ezekiel 38-39 scenario. But then she would only be a tangent. She would only be noticeable because she's a tangent to the big story. The big story is Jerusalem has been invaded from the north at least 26 times in ancient history, never once from Russia, every time from a Muslim region, from a Muslim force. Israel, since her independence in 1948, has been attacked at least 9 times in modern history, never once by Russia, every time by a Muslim force. So once you understand the Hebrew mindset that is cyclical and that God's mindset is the same, nobody would, believe that Russia is going to invade Israel. But this teaching is still perpetuated. People write blogs and websites and have teachings on this, and it's simply because they don't understand the Hebrew roots of end-time prophecy.